Good morning. Happy Sabbath. It's really nice to be here and see everyone in person. Last week I was in Mount Isa, so I enjoyed watching the sermon over the video link. And my goodness, what a sermon it was. If any of you here weren't here last week and didn't catch up on it on the web, go this afternoon and have a look. I've put the web address. I have to do something to make this start, don't I? There we go. Perfect. Technology is not necessarily my strong point. I have many other talents. But a big thank you to the audiovisual team who have been putting these up, because it means that when I'm way out there, I can still join in with everybody here. Now, I apologise for the mask. Mount Isa is an absolute cesspit of COVID at the moment, and we're getting lots of patients who are negative with the rats and positive on PCR, and lots of them are asymptomatic. So the mask is on for your protection, not mine, because I am a higher chance than probably the rest of you of passing on something asymptomatically. So feel free to imagine whatever face underneath here if you like. Please, not a chimpanzee, but anything else will probably be okay. Let's just bow our heads for a minute. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that we can come together, particularly on a Sabbath day, and it's a beautiful day that you've given us. Please bless all of us as we, please teach us so that we can learn more about you, and especially teach us about faith in difficult times, because we are facing difficult times, individually, but also corporately. Please bless us all. Amen. Now, last week, Zeni was speaking on Habakkuk chapter 1, and this week I get the first 4 verses of chapter 2. So, just as a little bit of a recap, where we left Habakkuk last week, I need to do this. I keep turning on my little cheat sheet and forgetting I have to do the top one as well. Habakkuk is absolutely desperate. He's crying out to God, saying, why aren't you doing anything? He's seeing the corruption in his own kingdom, in the kingdom of Judah. And then God answers him and showed him how he was going to deal with the corruption. What have I done? There we go. Yeah. And the cure seemed almost worse than the illness in this case, because what God told Habakkuk was, I am going to deal with the corruption, and I'm going to do it by sending in the Babylonians. About this time, the Babylonians came about 605 BC, so this would have been a little bit before that. But Habakkuk would have had fresh in his mind what had happened to the northern kingdom of Israel. It was in about 732 BC that the Assyrians came, and they were really, really terrible. I was doing a little bit of a Google search this week, and in the British Museum they have some stone carvings of wall carvings, and some of those carvings depict what happened when the Assyrians came. And I don't know whether they had colour on them at one time, but they were just stone. But the description of what was happening by the curator of the museum, he was describing not just a scene of victory for the Assyrians, but the torture and the execution and the subjugation of the countries that they were conquering. It was really awful stuff. The Assyrian method of subduing nations was to take all the inhabitants away and spread them out, dilute them over the Assyrian kingdom, and bring people from lots of different places back again. And it was that strategy which kind of resulted in Jesus' time in the hatred of the Samaritans. Because all these different people came, you had a melting pot of cultures and languages and religions. And that melting pot was quite different to the religion that God had designed for them. So that was why the Jews hated the Samaritans. They were seen as being an unclean mix of everything. So Habakkuk had all of this fresh in his mind when he's hearing that God is sending the Babylonians. And some of the words that were used to describe them are that they're a bitter and hasty nation, terrible and dreadful, they all come for violence. really sounds like something to look forward to. Okay. Now, Habakkuk is horrified by this, and he questions God. And Zenny went into that quite a bit last week. Why do you look on those who deal treacherously and hold your tongue when the wicked devours a person more righteous than he? Why do you make men like fish of the sea, like creeping things that have no ruler over them? They take up all of them with a hook. The Babylonians take them all up with a hook. They catch them in their net, and they gather them in their dragnet. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their dragnet, because by them their share is sumptuous, literally fat, like in Psalm 73. Their eyes swell out with fatness, and their food is plentiful. Shall they therefore empty their net and continue to slay nations without pity? So my own summary, why on earth are you giving them a free pass to do all kinds of evil with no consequences? So this is where we left Habakkuk last week. He doesn't understand. He can't see God at work. All he can see is something really horrific coming on the horizon, about to come over the hill on the backs of Babylonian horses. Okay. So, let's have a look at the first 4 verses of Habakkuk 2. I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I'm corrected. Remember, Habakkuk has just had this great big dialogue with God saying, what are you doing? And now he's resolving to sit and wait and see how God will answer. Then the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, and it will not tarry. Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. So when I was reading this, I was thinking, there were some questions that came to my mind. What is Habakkuk's attitude in this passage, and what is he actually doing? Why does God specify how to write the vision? The just shall live by his faith. What does this actually mean? So I thought we'd try and have a look at some of those. So we know a little bit about Habakkuk from the first chapter. We know he has a heart for the welfare of his nation because he's distressed by the corruption and how they've strayed from God's plan. He has a heart for God, and he's very comfortable talking to God and even questioning God, not in an arrogant way, but saying, I don't understand, what are you doing? Habakkuk has a very keen sense of justice. He does not shy away from emotion, and he's also logical and articulate. That's a formidable combination. And now we have a look and we can see how Habakkuk responds to this impending crisis. First of all, he doesn't do the headless chicken thing. He doesn't desert his post. He continues to stand his watch. He's the kind of guy you do want to have around in an emergency. He's actively awaiting God's reply. And he anticipates it the same way that when you have a conversation with a friend, if you say one part, you expect your friend to answer. That's the attitude I'm getting from him. And he's humble about it. It's not an arrogant, I'll wait for God to answer me. It's just, he will answer me when he's ready, and I'll see what he has to say. And then moving on to, why does God specify how to write the vision? Because he said to make it plain on tablets, which led me to question, what was the first mention of tablets? I like to use my iPad, which has a Bible reading app. And one of the great things about that is it's much easier to do searches than it is with a paper copy and a concordance. So when I did my search on tablets, the first mention of tablets is actually with Moses. In Exodus 31 and 32, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. And Moses turned and went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hand. The tablets were written on both sides, and on the one side and on the other they were written. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved. Now, why is it important that these tablets were engraved in stone? It was a covenant. That was the agreement between God and Israel, that he would be their God and he would be their people. Those tablets outlined the basis for God's government and his very character, and that being written on stone was embodied how unchanging that was, how permanent and how solid and dependable is God's character. So I thought it was then quite interesting that God specifies that the vision is to be written on tablets. When I did a little word search on the Hebrew word, the word for write plainly, it can also mean to engrave or to dig deeply, as well as to declare and make plain. And so once again, you have something clearly written, possibly on stone. They also had wax tablets back then. We don't know what kind this was. But God is instructing that this was to be a permanent record. And I just thought that was such a wonderful thing. We have God's commandments, the embodiment of his character written in stone. And when he talks about the future, that's written in stone as well. Oops, I forgot to. Catching up, sorry. Now, we live in a world that's full of forecasts. Weather, World Cup, football games, who's going to win the election, will it be Trump? Stock market predictions, interest rates, housing, New York Fashion Week, whatever. There are predictions everywhere. And I've discovered lately that the best way to get a prediction is to get into a taxi. And the taxi driver, I hope there are no taxi drivers here, by the way, will often expound on his latest theory. It's always been male taxi drivers. The ladies never seem to do this, about financial policy and what the government ought to be doing and this and that. It's the quickest way to get someone's opinion and prediction about what stocks you should buy, etc., etc. There've been a couple of rides where I've been a little bit too scared to do anything but smile and nod because I was afraid that he would actually slow down and I'd miss my plane. But anyway, we live in a world full of uncertainty and predictions, and everyone's trying to make a good prediction. But God does not make predictions. When he gives us news about the future, it is not a prediction that might happen or have a 90% chance of happening. It's a certainty. It deserves to be written in stone because it will happen. It's as certain as his 10 Commandments, as his character. It's as dependable as that. Oops, what have I done here? So he specifies, write the vision, make it plain. It's permanent, it's going to happen. Why? It's a permanent and clear declaration of the future, and it's entirely for our benefit. It's so we can act and move promptly and efficiently with certainty rather than milling about wondering what to do. It's described as that he may run who reads it. So that the person who reads this information about the future is able to make good decisions and act decisively upon the solid, dependable message of God. But there was more to it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. But at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it. Because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Now, poor Habakkuk cannot see anything good in the immediate future. So God gives him certainty but the certainty is on God's timeline. Though it seems to hesitate, though there may be questions about whether it will actually happen at all, wait for it. The certainty is coming. The events that God tells us about will come at exactly the right time, but God's time, not ours. Now, nobody likes waiting, and I really do know this at work. We even have a whole room dedicated to waiting room. It's called the waiting room. And most people don't like being there. They would much rather be somewhere else, and usually they're in some sort of discomfort, pain. It might even be the discomfort of waiting for results that they're a bit worried about. But whatever it is, anyone who's in that waiting room just really wishes they were somewhere else. And then that doesn't end the waiting. After you've got in from the waiting room, there's more waiting. Waiting for a bed if you're admitted to hospital, waiting for the surgeon to come and see you. There's lots of waiting in my line of work. And no one likes waiting. So probably some good examples of waiting on God's timeline are actually Jesus' birth, because his birth was predicted when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. And it was several thousand years before he actually came. Whoops, I've not caught up with the... There we go. When the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his Son. So it was certain he was always coming, but it was always on God's timeline and not necessarily ours. We have the fun of waiting for his second coming, and all of us wish that it would come now, yesterday. Personally, I really do want to go home and be with him. But we don't know when that is. Only the Father knows. But, as Jesus has said, there is a day and an hour, and it will come. God knows. We don't. But it will come right on divine schedule. So, moving on to, what does it mean, the just shall live by his faith? There's lots of references to faith in the Bible, and there's a few definitions in various places. But I've just picked out a couple that I really liked. Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it's impossible to please him being God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. It's a bit hard to have faith in God if you don't believe he exists. It's one of the fundamental prerequisites. You have to believe he exists. And the next one, Abraham. Abraham, in various places, is a great example of faith. He's a faith for both the Jewish believers and the non-Jewish. And there's this lovely verse in Romans 4:21, where it says that he didn't waver at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God, being fully convinced that what he had promised, he was also able to perform. So it's one thing to have faith in the existence of God, but to believe that he is capable of doing what he has said, and then living your life with that as in view. That's where the faith part comes into it. So if we believe that God is capable of doing what he says, then the Bible is our oyster. We can go through and find all of his promises, and they are ours to claim, because he will always do what he said he will do. There are lots of them. I picked out 4 of my favourites. He will save his people from their sins. That's probably one of my favourites. I definitely can't do that myself. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. That sounds like a little bit of an odd thing to rejoice over, but when there has been great injustice, we naturally want justice. We want to turn the tables. We want to get some sort of recompense for it. And what God promises is, I will make all things right. I will be the one who dishes out the justice. I will avenge you. And no one will ever get off his hook. But at the same token, I have to remind myself that I am also a perpetrator and perpetuator of injustice. So I'd actually rather be on his hook. I would rather have a kind, merciful God who can blend justice and mercy when he deals with me and my sins, and when I do unjust things to others. So that's having faith that he will deal fairly and all wrongs will be righted. And one of my other favourites, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Yeah, we all want that, don't we? We just want to go home with him. We also have a tendency to want to help God out. I've got a very short list of some examples of what faith is not, and I promise you I have done every single one of these things at some point and probably will many times in the future. We want to help God and help him know what's the right thing for him to do. So we decide how God should answer our prayers. Please God, have you heard that song, God, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Give me these things. We ask for things that aren't necessarily the best for us, and then we get upset if he doesn't give them to us. That's not faith. Setting our own time frame and becoming disappointed when God doesn't meet our expectations. We do that too. And it's easy to get discouraged when you're waiting, but remembering that God has his own schedule, and it's a perfect schedule. And then deciding what the fulfillment of God's plan looks like, ignoring the bits that we don't like and expecting his blessings to come in only one particular form, such as financial rewards, socially advantageous. In Jesus' time, they expected the Messiah to be a military leader that would boot out the Romans. So they picked out all those aspects of the Messiah that related to that and ignored all the other bits that they didn't like about him dying and suffering. But we all do that too. We have a tendency to do that. So, Jesus gave one example in a parable. He gave many examples. I'm going to tell you one of them about faith. And this one is from Luke 18. He spoke to them a parable that men always ought to pray and to not lose heart, saying, there was a certain city, a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, get justice for me from my adversary. And he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Then the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. Oh, it's a spider. Oops. Hear what the unjust judge said, and shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? That links back to Habakkuk about, though it seems to tarry, though it seems to be delayed, wait for it. It is coming. That concept of it, it might seem that justice is not coming, but it is coming, and it will come speedily. Something else that faith is confidence. This is the confidence we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we have asked of him. I love that one. And I really liked, there we go. I don't know why that ended up 2 slides. I just went back to the Romans 4:20 chapter verse, because I wanted to finish on that. Faith is being fully convinced that God will do and is capable of doing what he has promised to do. And I think, to me, the really beautiful example of that is when he was hanging on the cross and there was the thief hanging next to him. And that thief, when he asked, Jesus said, I tell you this day when everything looks like it's falling apart, when it's the worst day ever for you, you're hung up naked in front of all these people like I am, you've been beaten up, you're going to die. On this day, that's the absolute worst day, I give you the assurance that you will be with me in paradise. And that I think is the message that he was telling Habakkuk. This is an awful time. The Babylonians are coming. The remnant of Judah is corrupt. But it is not the end. There is a future, and it is coming. There is hope. So, in summary, God is good, very good, in the same way that when he finished creation, it was very good. God is very good to me. He's very good to you. And God is very good at being God.